All right, welcome. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at question 1.3b, which is about using the midpoint and distance formulas. These questions are actually only covering the distance formula. So let's take a look at what we've got. The first thing that I need to do here is figure out what I'm being asked. So I'm being asked to find the distance between my 2 points. So let's start with question A. The first thing that I need to going into this is the formula for calculating the distance between 2 points. So this is in your student journals. However, we'll write it down one more time here. To find the distance between 2 points, we use this formula right here. The distance, and it's a long one, is always going to be x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And this is the formula that we'll use every single time. Now, x2 and x1 are just my x coordinates, and same for y. And an easy way to figure out where those numbers come from is to just label them here. So notice here in part A that I am given 2 points, okay? In my first point, my first x coordinate, we'll call that x1 here. And my first y coordinate, I'll call y1. I can repeat this for my second point by calling this x2 because it's my second x point, and that's my second y point. It's very important that you label as your first step because otherwise it can be easy to mess up our distance formula because it is such a long one. Once we have our points labeled, the next thing we need to do is to just plug them into the formula. You will want a calculator handy for this because it can get a little tricky. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract my x's. So negative 5 minus 0 squared plus, and I'm going to do my y's, negative 1 minus negative 2 squared. Now, right off the bat, I do notice here that I have a double negative. And so whenever I have double negatives, remember 2 negatives will always make a positive. So that's really plus 2. Now at this point you have 2 options. You could plug this all into your calculator at once. That can get a little tricky, so I'm going to simplify it down a bit first. So I'm going to simplify what's inside of my parentheses. I know that negative 5 minus 0 is just negative 5. So that's just negative 5 squared. Similarly, negative 1 plus 2 is just going to be 1. So that's 1 squared. And so you'll notice we're already getting simpler. We can take this further by squaring my numbers underneath. Negative 5 squared just means negative 5 times negative 5, which is going to give me 25, and I don't actually need that parentheses. So that's going to give me 25 plus 1 times 1 is just 1. So of course, that leaves me with the square root of 26. Now, I cannot leave my number like this, and so we do have one final step left to do. We are going to calculate what the square root of 26 is. So this is where I would get a calculator out. If I type into my calculator, let's see, square root 26, and I enter that in, this is going to give me D is approximately, and that's the symbol for approximately, 5.01. Now you'll notice I've rounded here. If I were to type that into my calculator, it would actually be 5.099. I've rounded this to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so they didn't give us rounding instructions here, so I'm just going to make a note here to the nearest hundredth. So you always have to pay attention. Sometimes there will be rounding instructions, sometimes there will not. The hundredth is always a good one if there are no rounding instructions. So I now know what D is. We are done. All right. Let's do this one more time. We'll do one more example, and I'm going to switch colors here. In example B, I'm going to repeat the exact same process. So I'm going to start off by labeling my coordinates x1, y1, and x2, y2. Again, very critical step that we don't forget that. Once they're labeled, we plug them into our formula. So that's going to give me 8 minus negative 5 squared plus negative 4 minus 6 squared. If I begin simplifying this mess, 8 minus negative 5. Remember, two negatives will always make a positive, so that really is just 8 plus 5, which is 13. And negative 4 minus 6 is going to give me negative 10. All right, if I square that, that's going to give me 169 plus 100, which is, of course, 269. Again, this is the point where we would get out a calculator because I don't know about you, but I don't have the square root of 269 memorized. And if I enter that into my calculator, the square root of 269 is approximately 16.4. And it's technically 16.401, but again, if I were to round that to the nearest hundredth, I would keep that 0 the same, so it's actually just 16.4 rounded to the nearest hundredth. And we would be done. I know it's a little bit of a long process. You can shorten some of these steps by typing this all into your calculator. You would just have to add an extra set of parentheses around everything. And your calculator can do that for you. So choose your poison, but this is how you would do it, writing it out by hand. All right, that's the end of this video. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.